If any of you guys have been following the buzz around SHOT Show this year, one of the biggest things to come out is the Reformation, a firearm being released by Franklin Armory, the guys who made those binary triggers. Now everybody's been speculating online. I think it's the trigger, I think it's the ammo, and I'm going to tell you that I know exactly how it is classified as not a rifle or an SBR and how it's not NFA regulated. But first, before I go into why the Reformation is not an NFA regulated firearm, I'm going to go and debunk the theories other YouTubers and writers have put out there. Now, some people have said they thought it was ammunition related or had something to do with the trigger. We'll start with the latter. If you look at the ATF's definition of a rifle, and I'm not going to try and pretend that I memorized it, it says, and I quote, "The term rifle means a weapon designed or redesigned, made or remade, and intended to be fired from the shoulder, and designed or redesigned and made or remade to use the energy of an explosive in a fixed metallic cartridge to fire only a single projectile through a rifled bore for each single pull of the trigger." If that sounds about as clear as mud to you, you're not alone. Basically, the reason the trigger can't be the reason the gun is not classified as a rifle is because A, in the photo of the Reformation that we've seen circulating online, it's a classic Franklin Armory binary trigger. We know for a fact that every time you pull that trigger, the gun fires. And when you release that trigger, the gun fires. Hence the term binary. So it already rules out, based on that definition, if we were basing that definition solely upon the fact that it uses a trigger to detonate cartridges. Here's the other part. Okay, so people are saying, well, maybe it's a smoothbore gun and has rifled ammunition. Okay, so that could be, and that would actually probably work. The problem we have with that is a smoothbore firearm is inaccurate as hell. And it would also mean that it would be incredibly expensive to feed because you would need special ammunition. And we know from the photo that the gun feeds from Pmags. So whatever special ammunition you have has got to fit inside of a Pmag. So are they going to produce their own 5.56 that's pre-rifled? Probably not. Are you willing to pay $2 or even on a good day maybe $1 a bullet for specialty ammunition for an AR that may never be commercially successful enough for you to ever find ammunition for after a few years? No, probably not. Ask the inventor of the gyrojet if that's a profitable business plan, and he'll tell you no, it's not. Well, when the first firearms with rifled barrels arrived, I think I've heard estimates from either the 1400s or the 1600s, the rifling inside of them, or the lands and grooves that were cut into them, were cut A, in a straight line, and B, not to improve accuracy, but to aid in the reliability and the ease with which the gun could be cleaned. After all, black powder firearms foul up very quickly, and when they foul up to a point that the bore is tighter than the projectiles that you have on hand, it can no longer be used. That means to clean that gun, you need to have water, you need to scrub, and then you need to let it fully dry before putting any more charges in there. Otherwise, those charges have a very high percentage of just fizzling and dudding out because they're wet. So what's this mean? All right, so the Franklin Armory Reformation is a standard AR whose barrel features straight lands and grooves. It's not rifling, because the term rifling refers to those lands and grooves designed to, in part, spin or rifle the projectile, like throwing a spiral pass with a football versus just throwing it. Now keep in mind, the first rifled barrels were unintentionally more accurate. It was just a side effect of those lands and grooves that were cut into the barrel. So what it did is previously, when a musket ball left the smoothbore barrel, when it left the muzzle, it would be launched like a curveball. And if it was a predictable curve, that's fine. You could adapt for that, you could adjust for that, you could even zero the sights for that. The problem being is that projectile would leave the barrel at a random curve every single time. So maybe it hooks hard left, then it hooks hard right, then it hooks straight up, straight down, and there's no consistency to it. That's why the effective range of smoothbore muskets is so short. When they added in those linear, straight lands and grooves to the design, it kept the ball from leaving the muzzle in a random direction. Instead of being a curveball, if you will, it became a knuckleball. If you're not familiar with baseball terms, it means the projectile is still traveling in the general same direction, but it's not spinning and curving. It's sporadically traveling through the air. Ask anyone who's ever had a pitcher throw a knuckleball when they're at the plate, and they'll tell you that while it's a pain in the ass to predict, it does go over the plate every single time. What's my point? Well, Franklin Armory has taken a standard AR and put their own new proprietary barrel on there that features straight lands and grooves, effectively knuckling the 5.56 that leaves the barrel. Now, what does this mean in terms of effective range? I think it's fairly safe to assume the gun will be practically accurate enough at about 50 yards to possibly 100 yards, but I'm thinking realistically 50 yards. And if that sounds like, oh, that's terrible, I'd never want to use that, it's 11.5-inch pseudo SBR. What's my point? Well, if you're using it for home defense or using it for self-defense, 50 yards is plenty of space. Still, it's a really interesting concept. And while some people might scoff at the idea, I think it's actually brilliant. It's brilliant because people living in states that are not NFA friendly can get their hands on a gun that's handy and short like an NFA restricted item. It's also great for guys who want an SBR but don't want to pay the tax stamp, don't want to wait the 6 months to get that tax stamp back from the ATF. Now, do I think a bunch of other manufacturers will pick up on this? I think that entirely depends upon how well the Franklin Armory Reformation actually sells. Of course, we'll learn even more about this gun in the next few days at SHOT Show 2018. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for continued coverage of the latest and greatest from Las Vegas, this SHOT Show. Thanks, guys.